All right, today we are going to be learning how to create a very fun, very quick design called a color swatch design. And so the first thing you want to do is find an image that you feel like will make a really good color swatch. So I'm choosing just kind of an amorphous blob. I love kind of the idea of like holographic and shine, but I also like colors that aren't really easy to tie down. So when you look at something and you like can automatically tell it's blue, this experiment will be less effective than if you find something that you're like, oh, this is like shiny gold or something that's holographic, something that almost looks like it's color that shouldn't exist in the real world. Then the color swatch will be very illuminating to you. So I'm going to go into Photoshop, and the first thing you want to do is create a new file. I always say create for where you want to see it. So I often share work on Instagram, especially if it is smaller, just tester work. My final projects I usually make bigger so that they could either be printed. But when I'm just doing fun stuff, I always try and like make it so that I can share it someplace. I'm going to drag and drop my image in here. And the first thing I want to do is make sure that it fits to the outside edge. I do not want any section of white showing. I'm also going to find an area of this that I feel like is the most fun to look at. All right. So as I'm looking at this, this isn't the highest quality image as well. And so if I were looking through this, I would want to make sure that something's really, really crisp and clean, because the more crisp and clean it looks, the better your design will look. The first thing that will make your designs look less professional is if you have something that's really blurry. So I'm not going to change this right now just for time's sake, but in the future, that's something you should kind of be aware of. The next thing you're going to do is go over to your layers over here. And I have two. I have my background layer and I have my next layer. This is what all of your pieces should look like. If you just open an image, it will just be this layer, and you want to start an image from scratch. So the next thing I'm going to do is make a new layer, and I am going to be using pretty much the same few tools. I'm going to be, for this one, using either the circle or the rectangular marquee tool. For this one, I think I'm going to use the rectangular one. And I'm going to make squares on here, and I'm going to be dropping color into the background. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my square where I want this to be. And then I'm going to click the letter I, or I'm going to go to the ink dropper right here, and I'm going to pick the color. Now, when you click on something, you always see what color you're looking at. So you can kind of pick and choose which color you want to be illuminated. So then I'm going to go to my paint bucket tool. Now, default, for some odd reason, Photoshop has the default being gradient. I'm going to default it to make it be the paint bucket. So I hold my mouse over the gradient tool and then I switch it to the paint bucket tool. And then I can dump that into there. Now, I'm not crazy about that color. I think that this could be just a much prettier picture if I'm more choosy with my colors. So then I'm going to go to the next one. Now, what I can do too is I can draw a new one, or if I want them all to be identical, I can just grab this one and move it down. So now I'm going to have identical squares. So now what I'm going to do is, again, I take the ink dropper. I'm going to go to a different color, and I'm going to click the letter G this time for my paint dropper, and I'm going to put that one in. I go back to marquee tool. I move it. I bring it down. I'm going to move it over here. There we go. Now they're all lined up. I'm going to go teal, and I'm going to brush it in, dump it in. All right, so here are just three of the colors. Now, I can do this in a bunch of different ways. In fact, the reason why I put them all in different one layer, I can get rid of them. I could change up the design. Maybe I want circles instead. And I can do these little circles. Again, make my circle, I to pick up the color, G to drop it in. Oh, now I got to make sure I have a new layer. Always make sure you're on a new layer. And then again, M is the shortcut key for it. I can drag it down and I can do the same thing. And I could figure out which one will kind of show the design the best. So this is one way of doing it. I could also choose, like, for instance, the lasso tool and make more organic shapes. I could do something like this. And then again, I grab it, G, dump it in, and then go to the lasso tool again. I can just move that lasso. I can make my shape anything I want. My swatches can be anything. And so this is just one way to kind of start to understand how to see colors in the piece. Color is one of the elements of design, and sometimes as we are making work, we it's hard to see the different colors in a piece. And as we start to make our next designs, doing color palettes, I find that new designers will often rely on what I call out of just straight from the bottle paint colors. So when they use blue, they use oversaturated blue just right from the top corner. And they have a hard time realizing the colors when they are shown beside each other, when they're next to each other, when they're hidden within the design, that they can be super wild. So pay attention as you're hitting these. Where does the dot land in this? Let this almost be kind of a experiment of sorts and kind of a exploration. Where, when you see those colors, where do they land? How far into the white are they? The other thing is, you see this color as yellow, but then when you click on it, you realize it's actually a really light blue. And so let this kind of be a moment of just discovery when you're looking at your colors. How do they create new colors as they blend together? So this is kind of a fun assignment. The design is always kind of like simplistic and cool and cute, and it just kind of is a fun way. Also, the remember, the brain is a giant computer, and it loves to see the organic world put into boxes and organized in a methodical way. And so this is just kind of a way for you to kind of make just this little like piece of art for your brain to go, ooh, that's kind of cool. And so this is just fun to kind of play around with. Once you're done, you want to go export it, and you want to export, go to File, Export As, and then you're going to want to save it as either a JPEG or a PNG. And then you're going to want to export, always give it a name. I'm going to call this Swatch Swirl. And then I always send it to my desktop because that's the easiest place to find. If you're working on a PC, this will be a little bit bigger, but the same thing applies. Make sure it goes to your desktop and make sure that you give it a name and then save. And then that is it. Good luck designing, and I look forward to seeing what you create.